Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. Today we have Nicole Holland, who is the host of two hot podcasts, the Business Building Rockstars Show and Get Guests Ready. She helps subject matter experts increase their visibility exponentially through podcast guesting to create greater impact, influence, and income. So we're going to learn all about how do you make those things happen and become the influencer you're meant to be. So Nicole, welcome.
Thank you so much, Byron. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, glad that you're here. So how in the world did you get into this world of helping people become podcast guests and podcast hosting? It's not like someone just said one day, things to do in life. Well, this podcast thing looks cool. All right, I'll do that.
Not quite, not exactly. So I launched my business with something called a virtual summit because I realized that I didn't want to start at the beginning. And I had already had businesses in the past, but had taken on jobs. So I had been out of business for almost 10 years. And then here I am, and I'm like, I want to be in business again, and I want to use the internet, but I don't know the first thing about it. I have no network. I have no connections. Nobody knows who the heck I am. I want to be able to make a big splash fast. So I learned about this thing called virtual summits, decided to launch my business that way. And during that, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of John Lee Dumas. And he is all about podcasting. He teaches people about podcasting. And so that's what I interviewed him about, how people can grow their businesses through podcasting. And he convinced me, not only from the interview that we did, but in some talks when the recorder was off, that I should seriously consider it. And so I did. And I thought, okay, well, this makes a lot of sense. So I decided to, as a marketing arm, just a piece of the puzzle, to try podcasting. Sorry, I'm so used to saying podcast guesting now. Podcasting to grow my brand and to grow my business. And it worked really nicely. I loved it. I didn't expect to love it. I absolutely fell in love with podcasting. And along the way, I really started noticing the differences between a guest who was a great guest and a guest who was just there. And I started noticing what my audience really enjoyed versus what they didn't enjoy. And I started noticing what I really enjoyed versus what I didn't. And so I was talking about it and sharing my observations, sharing my opinions. And I got a lot of feedback from people saying, you need to teach this. People need to know about this. So I started teaching it. One thing led to another. Now, not only do I teach it, but I also actually do full service bookings to where experts who want to be guests on podcasts come to me, and I am essentially their agent.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's quite the journey to get there in terms of deciding that you want to jump back into the business world, and before you know it, you've created a different business than what you might have originally started off with the intention of.
Absolutely. And I think that happens to all entrepreneurs. If it's not happening to you, you probably are staying too narrowly focused and not paying attention to what's going on, and you'll probably be going uphill for a while. Every entrepreneur I know who's reached success in their business, it's because they're willing to pivot and change. They're willing to listen to what their customers see in them as their strength and as their greatness and what their customers want. And so that's something I learned a long time ago, is just pay attention to the journey, enjoy the journey and go with the flow. And when you go with the flow, it's a heck of a lot easier than going against the current. And so I always try and listen to what people want. Obviously, I'm not going to listen to haters, or there's some value sometimes in that, but I really just keep my mind open and my ears open and my eyes open and try and work on self-awareness. And that's how I've pivoted so many times and have finally landed into something that feels so on point, so perfect, and is an absolute joy. Like, dude, this is my work, what we're doing right now.
Right.
Hello. How awesome is that?
Right. It doesn't get any better than that, short of if you could do it from a nice sunny beach somewhere where you actually had a great Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because before we hit record, of course, we were just talking about, I just got back from 3 weeks on the road, and I have to tell you, there is no place like home, even with the winds, going outside, and it's a little on the chilly side for May, but I love it here. I just love being home.
It is an amazing feeling when you can be at home. It's no matter how exciting it is to go to different places, but when you can put your feet down on your own couch after traveling somewhere, or put your head against your own pillow, it just feels amazing because there's nothing like it.
Totally. And I'm an introvert. Like, I'm really an introvert. So this is a big stretch for me to go to so many different events in such a short period of time, especially. And so between that and, I have 2 cats, and I love them, and so I miss them when I'm gone. And the other thing is, Byron, to be completely honest, I cannot find a hotel shower that even comes close to my shower. And let me tell you, it's like when you get home, you can take a shower, you just feel like clean after being on the road for so long. Oh, it's
Right.
wonderful.
Now, that has to be quite the adjustment if you're looking for that perfect shower. I mean, you must have like one of those immersive, like, all body showers or something that's like you just stand there like, I'm clean.
I don't, and I want one of those one day. But you know what it is? I think it's more than anything water pressure. And I think most places have like low water pressure, and
Right.
I don't have really good water pressure and a really good shower head. So it's like, and then also I think in different places you have different water quality, like the hardness or whatever it is.
Right.
So no, I like my shower, and I never realized, because I'm like, oh, my bathroom's so dated, but now I really appreciate my shower.
Right. You don't think about those things when you're out and about speaking at events, but it does affect how you feel if you feel like I'm using someone else's bathroom where you have to concentrate. Okay, where did I put this at? Versus you're at autopilot. Okay, the toothbrush is over here. Okay, the soap is over there, and you just do it.
Yeah. And then the unpacking and packing. I mean, I am not complaining. It is a great problem to have, to be asked to, speak at so many things. In fact, today I kind of declined at the weekend. We're recording on a Monday, and I was invited to speak at an event that's going to be incredible. Like, it really is. But it's only a few weeks away, and it's in San Diego, and it's just like, and I had to think about it, and I slept on it, and I was like, I can't do this. And so I had to contact the organizer today and tell them, I'm so sorry, and I really respect and appreciate the invitation. But it's hard. It's hard to make those decisions to, when people want to support you and they're so excited about what you're doing, and they appreciate your message and want to share it with their audience. It's like, I'm finding it's really hard to, figure out what to say yes to and what to say no to sometimes.
Right. That's a hard thing, because you think of all the different opportunities that you're deciding that you've gone into business for yourself, yet people want to have you at their events speaking and making a difference. But then you have to realize, well, you went into business for yourself for a reason. It wasn't necessarily to be a road warrior, where you walk into the airport, they're like, hey, how's it going? Like, am I here that much? They know me by first name.
Yeah, and it's funny because actually just before we hopped on this call, I got a message from a friend of mine who's a podcaster, and he started out about a year ago. It's been just over a year now, I think, and he wrote me and said, hey, I have this question. Is it, and he told me his situation. He's got way more content than he can put out. I mean, he's recording months in advance, and he's got, lots and lots of people wanting to be on his show. And he said, do you know of anybody charging money to be on a podcast as a guest? Do you know anyone who's charging to be on the show? And I contacted him back, and I said, I do actually. It seems like there's a bit of a trend now. There's a number of people who I've come across who are charging guests. And, as podcast guesting is my wheelhouse, and that's what I focus on and teaching on, gosh, that's just I have some strong feelings about that, and mixed feelings too. I think it depends on where somebody's at and what they're charging and how and all that. But I don't like it as a rule and overall. And so that's what I told him. I was like, look, you are up leveling, which means that you need to be more selective about your guests. You need to be more aware of who you want. And it's difficult to start saying no. So you create those processes that take a bit of the work of that out for you, putting the onus on the potential guest to follow your process. But I said, I don't like that. I don't think it's a good look when people charge to have guests, because what's happening oftentimes is they're not getting the best guests. They're getting the guests who are sometimes, a bit more on the desperate side, or a bit more of the not really valuing themselves as an equal partner, but feeling like they're less than the host if they have to pay and all this other stuff. I mean, that's my perception. But I think anytime we up level in our business, there's more and more and more opportunities, whether it's to have people join us at our events or our podcasts, or whether it's that we are being invited to more and more press and more events. So it's definitely something that, it's a growing pain, I think, for everybody.
It is indeed. And, I'm like you, I have those mixed feelings about it, as if people can pay to be on a show, if you think about it, that means that all it takes for somebody, like, if I just pull out my Visa card, I can be there, but then it doesn't mean there's value.
Well, let me put this out there too, Byron, because again, what I focus on is the right fit. So when I book guests, and I see this all the time, actually I had recently, I saw a person who was featured on a show that's a newer show, and there's nothing wrong with new shows. We all have to start, but he is somebody who I really, really enjoy. But in interviewing him to be a potential host that I work with to send guests to, I learned that he gets about 25 downloads per episode. And so that's not an okay number for my clients. There's nothing wrong with it when you're starting out. I mean, everybody starts with 0, but there's a level because people are paying me to represent them and making those choices for what's the right fit and what's not the right fit. And so he's getting about 25 downloads per episode. And so I told him I'd love to work with him and I'd love to support him, but what he needs to do is focus on growing his audience, okay? So I had checked back in on him, and there was a gentleman who I had a sales call with who was interested in getting out on podcasts as a guest, and he was comparing me with somebody else in the market. And his concern with me was money. And he said, well, you just cost way more than this person, and so I'm going to go with this person. I said, that's fine. It's perfect. I'm not for everybody, and everybody's not for me. And so what I had to have a bit of a chuckle, not in a like ha 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 way, but in a it's interesting way. Just that I see this again and again and again, that people will pay to be on podcasts without understanding the value that they're receiving from the purchase, right? So here this person paid probably close to $200 essentially for that interview. They didn't pay the host, they paid the booking person. But they paid for that, and they're not getting out to more than 20 people right now. So, and of course, it'll grow and all this stuff. But so I think there's a lot more to it than just the actual interview itself. You have to be very aware when you spend your money making an informed decision of what's the value there. So there was a bit of controversy some time ago. I mentioned John Lee Dumas. He was promoting his first book, and he decided that he was going to offer people who wanted to be on his show an opportunity to get on the show by purchasing a box of books, basically. And part of his thing is too, he's building schools in a third world country. And I mean, there's a whole lot to it. It's not completely selfish how he's doing the books. Even if it is, it's totally fine, but it wasn't. And he just thought, wow, this would be a really cool way to promote the book, get it in more people's hands, and get people on the show who are motivated, right? Because he gets like 300 plus applications to be on a show every month. So he put it out there, and there was this crazy uproar within the podcasting community of like, how dare he, how can he charge people to be on the show, blah, blah, blah. In this case, I completely defended it, because I think when you get to that point where you're getting millions of downloads and it is an opportunity for somebody to get that prestige and to get, to be able to say, oh, I was on this show, it is a lot of value. There's a lot of value there. So by, spending a couple $100 on books that you can then give out in exchange for that kind of opportunity, I think that's justifiable. But just to pay to get on a show because the host can charge and the person on the other end doesn't know what the value is, I think that's, I don't like that.
Right, exactly. It's a value proposition there, because if you think of it from that perspective, if you have 300 people applying every single month, technically speaking, after about 45 days, you don't have to worry about finding guests for the rest of the year. So you have to have some type of measure to determine how do you get people through the door. Otherwise, it becomes overwhelming.
And mind you, they also have to pass his criteria. They have to also, like, it wasn't just, hey, if you buy books, you can be here. It was like they had to go through his process, and once they were cleared through the process, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure because I wasn't a part of this, but I believe what the process was after they were already accepted, basically, they were invited to purchase the books, and get that interview. So it wasn't like anybody who wants. No, he still put them through his vetting process.
Right. And you have to have a process, because I think there's so many people out there that say, sure, you can come on. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do to myself?
Yeah. I was there.
I think everybody goes through that. All it takes is one or two guests. You realize, okay, I now have a process to prevent that scenario from taking place ever again.
Ever. Of course, there's always people that get through, but yeah.
Right.
We're always tweaking it, right? And I think it applies to not just podcasting, but any business that we go. I mean, I know I've fired clients. I know I've held on to clients I should have fired. I know I have held on to team members I should have fired longer than I should have. I think we all go through that, right? That's part of growing, and that's part of becoming better and better at whatever it is that we're doing.
Oh, definitely. It's something that we just have to do it. We go through that growth process where we start off with, here's my idea, and then it just increases. It's just a matter of time before you get to the end result. Mm-hmm. So now let me ask you this, Nicole, because you started off with your podcast, and like everybody, it was start off at ground zero. Like, okay, I am my own subscriber. Yay. Like, you call up friends like, could you please be my best friend to subscribe? But how did you start scaling it so that way you started getting a substantial number of downloads? Because there's people out there who think, well, I want to start a podcast, but how do I grow it? So then it becomes a place where people want to appear on, versus it like, yeah, you're nobody. I don't want to be on your show. Yeah.
So thanks for asking. That's a really good question. I actually didn't ask people to do me that favor, if you will. I tried to incentivize them to, right? But I wanted to make sure that if people were going to be subscribers at the beginning, that they actually wanted to. So I wasn't like going out and asking my friends that had nothing to do with business. I was reaching out to contacts, and I spent a lot of time making individual messages to, my Facebook friends and things like that were actually business owners or wanted to be business owners. So I was really targeting who I asked. And basically I just came from the standpoint of, hey, have you heard that I'm about to launch this podcast? And if they wrote back and they said, no, what's that all about? I have you heard I've launching this podcast, and I'd love it if you would take a listen if you're interested or something like that, And so if they wrote back and said, what's it all about? Then I can say, yeah, so here's the link and, here's what it's about. But I wasn't reaching out to people just to get downloads. And I think that's something that most people are taught to do, like just get those downloads to move the needle. I didn't do that at all. My biggest source for new audience development was Twitter. And again, a lot of highly time consuming effort to where I targeted people who I thought would potentially be ideal listeners. I followed them, and then I started conversations with them. So I would follow them. I followed them. If they followed me back, then I would start conversations with them. Like, hey, whoever you are, I'd use their name, not just their Twitter handle, but I'd actually figure out what's their name. And I'd say, hey, so-and-so, what are you currently working on? Or what's your biggest challenge right now in being an author, or something like that. Like, it would come from their profile. I'd actually look and spend a couple minutes taking interest in them. I'd ask them a question, and if they wrote back, then the dialogue continued. If they did not write back, they did not write back, and that was fine. Of course, I posted everything I was doing on Twitter. I made, lots of graphics. I'm big on graphics. I think that has helped hugely to grow my audience, just to be more visual. But when somebody would identify what they were having a challenge with, or, a lot of times I'd say, hey, what are you most excited about for 2016? I think, because I launched March 21st, 2016. So it hasn't been that long. So I'd say, like, what are you most excited about? Or, do you have an upcoming launch or something like that? And so when they would tell me, and then the dialogue would happen, if it was appropriate, and only if it was appropriate, I would mention my podcast. And I have to tell you, I got raving fans who then would share my content, who would then say, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe I just consumed, like, I don't know, maybe I'd have 30 episodes out, and they'd say, I just downloaded and listened to all your 30 and I can't wait for the next one. Now I got to wait 3 days, So that was really cool. I was more focused from the beginning and up until now on building an audience of people who just couldn't get enough, rather than an audience that was apathetic. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. You want to have that crowd of raving fans, because that's what makes a big difference. And I think people, they lose sight of that. They're looking at, let's just say, the sheer numbers of it versus those people who are passionate. I would look at it this way. I'd rather have, let's say, 500 people who follow me that they share everything I do than, let's say, 10,000 people that would never share a single thing.
Totally.
Because we live in that world where sometimes that number becomes a status symbol. It's like, oh, I have this, but what's the real impact? Are you making a difference in the people's lives when they actively talk about, like, when they see, like, oh my gosh, I love that episode. Or that they're listening to it, but they don't even bring it up. Like, oh, that's right, you do have that. Like, what rock are you living under?
Totally. I was actually just in a mastermind call earlier today, and one of the women in my mastermind, I guess she signed up for, or she subscribed to Get Guest Ready, which is my new podcast all about podcast guesting. And this is somebody who has been in PR for, like, 20 years. I mean, she knows publicity, she knows bios, she knows interviews and all that. But podcasting really is a different beast, and it is new media, and it is quickly evolving. And so she was curious to get my take on it. And so she subscribed to my podcast. And so today in the check-in for our mastermind, she actually mentioned, she's like, I'm really appreciative of Nicole Holland because she helped me understand how to create a great guest profile. And now I have that on my page and I'm ready to pitch to podcast hosts. And I'm like, yay, that's awesome. So you never know who you are impacting, because here's somebody who, by all estimations, doesn't need my support, and she got something out of it. And now she's sharing with other people her experience. And, like, that's already turned into a sale from me, right? From
Right.
somebody who she introduced me to. So definitely impact over numbers every single day and twice on Sunday.
Oh, just twice? Come on, it's the weekend. It's not like anyone else, they have to do something else. They just wake up like, all right, I'm watching football or baseball or something else. So they can go for like 3 times. Gosh.
Okay, 3 times on Sunday.
Oh, there we go. Much better. It's those things that make a difference, I think, when you focus on the impact more than anything else, because we just live in that society where we can easily focus on the wrong things. Mm-hmm. And
Totally.
it's something we have to do, because we're doing it for a reason. I think the other aspect is people sometimes forget that it's work to put on a podcast. It's not just, oh, I'm just going to talk on the microphone. Like, well, that's part of it. There's everything else that people don't see that takes place behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. And that's how it is with every job, right? It doesn't
Right.
matter, or job, not job, but business, because I love this. When I started and I got online and I would see things like how I made $100,000 in my last launch, or whatever. It's like overnight success goes from 0 to $1 million in just 1 year, from food stamps to financial freedom, all this garbage, right?
Right.
It's like, yeah, but it takes a long time for an overnight success. It doesn't
Right.
just happen, but a lot of people like to make you think, oh, look, well, it's so easy. It's just like talking into a mic, and then you've got this podcast. But no, it doesn't matter if it's podcasting or any other kind of business. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of hustle and things going on behind the scenes, a lot of heart that people will never know about.
Right, exactly. We have to go beyond that. It's all about the impact we want to have. Because you think of how many people, they start off like, I'm going to create a podcast, but they give up after 5 or 10 episodes. Not
'Cause it's
realize
hard.
It's hard, but they're expecting that overnight success, that if after the first 5 episodes, I'm going to have all these people just suddenly flocking to my door. No.
No.
It doesn't work that way. I wish it did. That would have been incredible. Like, I put out episode number 5 and I hit the jackpot. Yay! No. It's like, I think I found a penny on the floor. Great.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's a
and I think
long-term
the
thing.
goal should always be, again, whether it's business or podcasting or whatever, it should always be making that impact and affecting change, and making people's lives better and spreading joy and all that hokey stuff. I mean, without that, you don't have something sustainable. If you don't have the heart behind it, if you don't have the passion behind it and the willingness to overcome adversity, then you're not going to have something sustainable or for the long term. And that's why, it's very, very, very few people who ever have, what is it, the 1% or whatever. Like,
Right.
it's very few. And it's not because they're any better than anybody else. It's because they persevered when most people say, oh, no, I'm not going further with this. It's too difficult.
Right, exactly. You have to be in it for the long term. I think a great example is if you look at Olympic athletes, that in most cases, let's say someone's competing in their 20s, but when they first started practicing a sport, they might have been 3 or 4. So they trained sometimes twice a day from a very young age for 20 years for a shot at winning a medal. And that's it. Mm-hmm. And we think about like, well, what makes us think that overnight success should be a possibility? You're not buying a bunch of lottery tickets and hoping like, yes, I got the right numbers. It took me 30 years. Like, yeah. And that's the thing people don't realize. There's that lead up time, the stories that you build up, the experiences that lead you to become who you are. Because you think about the interviews that you've done, the guests you've had, the way you're interacting, it's a culmination of all the experiences you've had up to that point, that it wasn't like you just woke up one morning when you were a child and you looked around, you were born, and someone had you on a microphone, you're like, hey, everybody, how are you doing? And you started a talk show when you're still wearing diapers. It didn't work that way. That'd be pretty darn cool. Like, look, a talking baby. We're going to Hollywood. But it's so much more. And that's what people have to do.
Indeed.
So because you've been on so many different podcasts and you help clients get onto podcasts, what, in your humble opinion or expert opinion or whatever word you want to put in front of the word opinion, do you constitute as being a great podcast guest? Because as we can both relate, we've both had those. You're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? So we don't really have to talk about what someone should not be, but what should they be?
I think number one, they should be open and willing to be vulnerable and to go wherever the host wants to go. So a lot of hosts have very standard questions and structure, and that's what they do. And then a lot of hosts or other hosts have like just this conversational format. And what happens when somebody goes on a podcast, oftentimes with the antiquated thought process that most people have about interviews that they get from television, radio, and stage speaking, what happens is they come on with their own agenda and they have talking points and they have things that they're going to get out no matter what. Well, the host is the host. You're driving the bus. So when you come in with that agenda, you're already starting off on a bad foot. When you come in very open and willing to go with the flow, again, go with the flow. It's easier than going upstream. I think that makes for a better interview, whether the podcast host has structured questions or they have a conversational style. Just being open to seeing what happens. It's like I equate it to going into somebody's house. So I live in Canada, and it's customary here that we take our shoes off when we walk into a house, whether it's ours or somebody else. We just don't walk in the house in outdoor shoes. And it's like if somebody were to come over and insist on wearing their shoes through the house, it's rude. You just don't do that, because in my house, you take your shoes off, right? If you go to somebody's house and they take their shoes off, and especially if they ask you to take their shoes off and you say, like an episode of Sex and the City, they go with the outfit. I'm not taking my shoes off. You're not welcome, right? You're going to disconnect from the host. And then also the other party goers are going to look at you like, are you kidding? Like, I don't want to talk to you. You're rude. It's the same thing with podcast guesting. When you go on a podcast and you take your shoes off and you're willing to go with the host, the audience enjoys the interview and they stick around for it generally because they care about the host's message. Like, I'm coming in here as your guest. Most of your audience has no idea who I am, probably, right? Like, they've never heard of me. But because you respect me and because you invite me in, they're keen to listen in. Now, if I came in here with my own agenda, that's disrespectful to you, as if I were walking in your house with shoes, and your audience will disconnect and probably not listen to the whole interview because they just the disconnect, right? So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, it definitely is, because I think people forget about that. It's where we have that experience where we want to go and like, I want to promote this book or whatever, and the reality is the conversation might not lead to it unless it's something specifically targeted for that. And just like you said, every podcast has a different environment on it, where some are structured. So you know in advance, here's the 10 questions. So it can feel robotic from that standpoint. Mm-hmm. Like it's a regular interview series. Or it's like this, it's like pretty much whatever comes up is going to come up.
Well, and another thing about that is that you at the beginning, right at the top, you introduced me, and I had the opportunity to give you a bio to introduce me with. Right. So you have given me the opportunity to introduce my agenda, if you will, and right. I expect at the end you'll probably also invite me to let people know how to follow up with me, right?
Right.
So this is what I share with my clients is your agenda matters at the beginning and at the end, and everything in between is all about them and what they want, meaning the host.
Exactly. It's something that people don't realize it when it's this type of a format, because you have the opportunity to give that bio, to talk about your background, that sets the tone for everything. And so many people don't realize it. Like, how did I not talk about this? Because all the questions are based off of the little 2 or 3 lines you send me in advance, and then the first few things that you say.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use that properly, well, then you can be able to talk about the ins and outs of a service that you have by giving value, not necessarily saying, well, in my program, it's this. Well, no. Like, people will know that you have a program, but people will care more if you show them how much you care by how you help people.
Mm-hmm.
Than it being a consistent sales pitch, because we live in this world where people have that it's a mindset of we must sell versus how do you educate an audience where you invite them into your world, because then the trust factor is so much higher that they realize this person really cares and they know their stuff, and that makes them want to ask that important question: how can they learn more?
I love that you just said that educate. It's so important. And yeah, in this society, I think that there's a big distinction between the many and the few. The many who want to give information and like speak from a pulpit versus the few who are really committed to that education and that transformation. And it's with those experiences of being educated and transformed that people want to take the next step. And with the information, you're pushing, and you may win, you may get the money in the short term, but in the long term, it won't continue. Whereas when you educate people and you support people and you just give generously without asking, like, what am I going to get in return for this? I think that, you get more back than you could ever imagine as long as you're open to it.
Right, exactly. It's the more you give in the world, it makes a difference, because you never know how that information can help somebody. Because I think of the number of times that I'll just freely just give someone some information saying, hey, do these few things here that's going to fix what the problem that you're having with. And it's something that some people would say, but you should have charged for that. I'm making a difference in someone's life, and you know what? Every time they have that problem come up, who's the first person they're going to think of? Yep. And when you do it consistently, now you start getting tens of people, hundreds of people, and so on, that are always going to think of me when there's a problem that comes up. So who's the first person when they see someone that says, they're having a problem with this? Who are they going to send them to?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the easiest things that anybody can do, which is giving that value. That we live in that scarcity world where people think, but I just can't give up my knowledge. Like, let me let everyone into a little bit of secret. There was this thing that was created a while ago called YouTube. The answers to most things are there in some capacity. So it's either someone is going to go there or they're going to ask you. Either way, they're going to find the information. So information, we live in abundance of it. What people need help with is implementation and accountability.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
That's the key. So when you show people how to find the information, they're going to come to you. It's like, how do I do this? Well, I can help you now.
Mm-hmm.
Because they already know what they need. They just don't know how to do it. So you can help them implement.
Yeah.
And then they become your client.
For sure. And it's like, and of course, not everybody's going to become your client, but it's like when you're giving away generously for free, then they think, well, if I'm getting this much value for free, then, there's a lot less hesitation to saying yes to a program. And since we're talking about this, I'm going to just share with you, like, my strategy. So at the end, when you ask how people will be able to reach out or stay in touch, I'll let them know that it's my website with a special URL just for your listeners. And and what happens there is that if they want to if they want to listen to my podcast about guesting, it's right there on the page, freely available. There's no opt-in required. And if they want to take it to the next level and get more of that education from me and more implementation, then they can sign up for my free e-course. It's a 3-week course. The principles are what I used to charge $2,000 to teach, and now I'm giving it all away for free. So for free, right? And if they enjoy that, and most people will say, well, you can't give that away. Oh my gosh. And whatever. It's just, again, scarcity versus abundance. And I've had a lot of people go through my free e-course and tell me how they've learned so much and they're going to move forward without me. Like, they're not hiring me. In fact, some of them are going to become competitors of mine. That's cool. Whatever, right? Like, I've taught them. Now they're going to go off and do what they're going to do with it. But a few people start going in it and they're like, okay, wait a minute. This is a lot of work. I don't want to do this myself. So who are they calling first and foremost to have them, to consider to have them book for them? Me, right? Or maybe they want the done with you, which is where I support my clients in helping them do it, but I also introduce them to some of the podcasters I know and do a lot of like hand holding, and they basically get one-on-one coaching with me to do it themselves. So there's all these different offerings I have that are at a higher ticket, but I'm giving first and foremost something for free. And not only free, like, no obligation. So people can do this with a blog, with a podcast, with Facebook videos, a free Facebook group. There's so many different ways they can give value for free without asking for an email address. And then they can go to the next step, whether it's a webinar, an e-course, a challenge, etc., by getting an email address. And then there's the paid opportunities. And I think that's pretty transparent, and I think it's highly valuable. And if people don't understand how that works, then, they're probably not the people you want to work with anyhow.
Right, exactly. You have to decide upon it. And it's something interesting that you brought that up, that it's a course that you used to charge for, that people with a scarcity mentality will always say, well, no, you can never give that away for free, and not realizing that as technology advances and more information becomes available, the things that were once premium courses, you can now find the information totally for free if you just do a simple search on Google.
Totally. I love that you say that. I mean, I was talking with somebody earlier today who was like, I can't give this away because it's part of my course. And if I don't, if I give this away, then blah, blah, blah. And it was like going around in circles. And I'm like, listen, you're going to do what you're going to do, and people are going to steal it, and people are going to do what they're going to do with it if that's what they want to do. I mean, you can't control that. I know for me, I wanted to be top of mind. And more than anything, I'll be 100% honest with you here, Byron. I was sick and tired of having guests come on my show that didn't understand my values or what I thought was important. And so that's where this all started from. I was like, okay, let me give it away here, because if I'm only charging people who already know they have a problem, all these people who think they're brilliant and awesome guests don't realize it. And I don't want to interview them. They're difficult. Not all people, I think, but there would be people who were difficult guests, even if they were brilliant people. And so that's why I was like, let me just give all this away for free. And then this will also help me really get better guests for myself. So it was quite selfish in that way.
Right. And it's great that you mentioned that, because when I look at the information I give out, I focus on one thing these days. If people say, well, if you just really talk about this stuff, well, what do you charge for it? It's those two things I mentioned before. It's the accountability, and then it's the implementation, because that's something that it truly matters for people. Just like when you think of the people that hire you, they're like, yeah, this is work. And they say, can you just do it for me? Because you're going to have some people that are going to take it, they're going to run with it. Great, awesome. They're still going to think of you if someone says, who do you go to learn this? This person.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win across the board, and also that selfish thing, because then you don't have to see people just making mistakes. You're like, oh gosh, like you just bury your face into your hand, like, and just shaking. You're like, oh my gosh, why? I try
Yeah.
not to do that on a regular basis because it's all about educating people. Sometimes I
Totally.
would think, like, in the past, like, there could have been like a handprint on my face. Like, where's that from? If I told you, you would probably do the same thing. So I'm not telling you.
That's awesome.
But it sounds like it's important for people to understand how to be a great guest by understanding it's the agenda of the host and to go along with it. It's like if you're going on a roller coaster ride, you're not in control. You're there just for the ride and have fun.
So true. Have fun.
Right. Just avoid the ones that get stuck at the top and you're just kind of looking at like, well, this is convenient.
Well, you can still make the most of it, right? You get stuck up there, just like you can get stuck on an interview that's maybe not as engaging as you'd hoped. And you
Right.
just still just go, okay, this is what it is. And you just enjoy the view.
Right, exactly. You always go along with the flow. And what to share with the listeners today. So, like right before this interview, I just finished up one before the power goes out in my building. I'm thinking, well, I'm glad that it waited until after the last interview to finish. But there's like, now I have another problem. When is it going to come back on? So I'm just watching the clock, and it's just getting closer and closer. Like, am I going to have to reschedule? And then suddenly it comes back on. I feel like doing a happy dance. Like, yes, it's back up, and didn't miss a beat. But it was, being flexible. It was going along with the flow, because if it didn't come back up, was there anything I could do right then and there? Not at all. I could have been jumping up and down, throwing a fit
Nothing would
until the
change.
technician could fix it. It doesn't matter. So you focus on what you can be able to control in your life, things you can influence, and you go along with it, and it makes life so much easier.
Byron, I love everything about your message. I love the show, and I love what you're doing here.
Oh, thank you so much. So now, Nicole, as we begin wrapping things up, what is one thing that you recommend people to do if they truly want to become a better podcast guest? Because everybody loves great guests instead of those that you just don't talk about.
Okay, so number one is I'm going to recommend that you go to interviews.convert.com/Byron. And like I said, there you can listen to Get Guest Ready. You don't have to opt in. You don't have to subscribe. You don't have to give me your firstborn. You just can listen. And if you resonate and you want more, then you can opt in and get the course. Again, it's free. It's 3 weeks, and I'll give you my templates. I'll give you lessons. I'll give you things to implement and to get that transformation. That's I mean, number one, like it's an amazing program. It really is. And if you really care about being a great guest, that's what you want to do. Put that time in, listen, learn, and move forward. And if you don't want to do that, I will still give you a second option. If you're like, no, Nicole, this is all fine and well, but I'm like not listening to you anymore. Cool. So what you want to do is think about how you want to be treated, because that's really what it all boils down to. Put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, if I were doing this, how would I appreciate other people treating me? So for example, when you're a guest and you're on somebody's show, tweet about it or put a Facebook post or an Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, right? Share the episode. Don't expect just to come in and allow the host to do all the work, because you wouldn't want to be treated like that if you were in their shoes. So treat them how you'd like to be treated, and that will get you so far.
That is great. It makes all the difference in the world, because if you share the episodes that you're an interviewee on and people are doing the exact same thing, everyone grows as a result of it, versus it just being a one-sided effort. Mm-hmm. Where it makes all the difference in the world. So besides going to interviews that convert, how else can people learn more about you and explore everything that you have to offer?
Oh, thanks for asking. So yeah, I'm again going to send you to interviews.convert.com/Byron. That's important that you make that distinction. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll find my social media. So you'll find an email link. So if you want to reach out to me and just let me know, like, hey, this made a lot of sense, or here's what I enjoyed. I love hearing from listeners. And I think I'll also put on there some information about my other show, which is the Business Building Rockstars Show. And that's really what I'm up to. I mean, if you get into my community, I'm actually, at time of recording, working on creating a free Facebook group. So, if you get onto my Facebook and you like my page, you'll learn about that. If you get into my community, you'll always learn about what I'm up to. So interviews.convert.com/Byron is the best place to go.
Oh, excellent. Well, I want to thank you once again for coming onto the Big Movement podcast today and sharing your wealth of wisdom about being a great podcast guest and just being a great person overall, because ultimately people want to be around great people.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.